Yo, what's going on, Headliner Nation? One of the big name wide receivers that we've been waiting for to finally come off the board has done so, as Curtis Samuel is going to the Washington football team and reuniting with his former head coach, Ron Rivera. And honestly, this is a really good signing. I like this. There's one player in particular I think could see a little bit of decrease in fantasy value, not a whole lot, but a little bit. But overall, I think this is a great signing. I think it's good for Curtis Samuel. I think it's good for Terry McLaurin. I think it's good for the offense. I think it's good all around. The terms of the deal: Curtis Samuel signing in Washington, 3 years, $34.5 million. Haven't heard anything yet in terms of like guaranteed money or things of that nature. But I think this is a player, since he was drafted back in 2017, I think we've all been kind of waiting on it to happen, waiting on the breakout, waiting for him to take that step forward. You know, coming into the league, he was kind of seen as a guy that, you know, you have some questions about. What's he going to be? At Ohio State, he was really a Swiss Army knife. He was used all over the place. When guys like that in college come to the NFL, it doesn't always translate, okay? And going to Carolina and being there with Christian McCaffrey has taken away some of what they could potentially do with that. So I don't necessarily think that we've seen some of the same type of Curtis Samuel plays as we've seen in the past. And now going to Washington, you've got Antonio Gibson there. Antonio Gibson not really used too much in the passing game last year because J.D. McKissic was really that guy, especially when Alex Smith had taken over and he was, check down Alex. We know he's going to J.D. McKissic quite a bit. So J.D. McKissic might lose quite a bit of value, and Antonio Gibson might see a little bit of a decline in his ceiling just because some of those short or intermediate passes that we thought might go to Antonio Gibson are probably going to be going to Curtis Samuel instead. But last year, Samuel seeing really the big breakout that we've been hoping for. It was a career high with 77 receptions, a career high 851 receiving yards. Touchdowns, unfortunately, came down a little bit. Went from 6 all the way down to 3, but 5 total touchdowns. He had 2 rushing touchdowns as well because he had 41 rushing attempts and 200 yards last season. So the one thing that we've got with Curtis Samuel, and another thing to really make mention of here, the biggest leap for him last season was a career-high 79.4 catch percentage. That was up from only 51% the year before. In 2019, he had 105 targets, but only caught 51% of them. He had 54 receptions. This past year, 97 targets, 77 receptions. So a few things that really kept him from making that leap when you look at that catch percentage, because up until last year, 57, 60, 51, and then all the way up to 79, he cleaned up some of that. And that was really what we needed to see out of Curtis Samuel for him to take that next step. Really, really glad that we are able to see that out of him. And the one thing that I like about this now heading to Washington, it's really going to help spread the field a little bit more. Terry McLaurin on the outside, he's our wide receiver 1. But this is he's going to be the wide receiver 2 there, okay? And he's going to play in the slot. I like it. That is what we need from Curtis Samuel, playing out of the slot. So, and again, the wide receiver depth there is not great. There isn't going to be a ton of guys that are going to step in line in front of Curtis Samuel and take a lot of those targets. And when we see these wide receivers, and I think I've got more breaking news. Maybe not more breaking news. There's just so much of it right now. But anyway, back to the conversation. When you see these guys make these signings and sign with these free agents, you want to see that they're stepping in a position that is really, really good for them. And I'd be willing to argue so far that this might be one of the best fits that we've seen in free agency, especially at the wide receiver position. I mean, you drafted Antonio Gandy-Golden last year. You still have Kelvin Harmon. Cam Sims is a guy who kind of stepped up last year. Isaiah Wright had to play a little bit as well. but nobody that steps up to Curtis Samuel in terms of his athletic ability and what he can do. So you got Terry McLaurin, he can stretch the field. We know Ryan Fitzpatrick can sling it and go down the field with it. More than likely, he'll be the starter to begin the season at least, if not the entire season, depending on if they spend or who they spend a draft pick on in the draft. So we know he can push the ball down the field, and now you've got all of this open room for Curtis Samuel to operate in, because don't forget, you've got Logan Thomas there still as well. So he is also a guy kind of in that intermediate area, and especially in the red zone, that's going to have a lot of guys looking at him. So I like this fit for Curtis Samuel. I like it for Washington. Curtis Samuel, for me right now, still probably going to be kind of in that wide receiver 3 range. If we're talking about PPR leagues and we're jumping up to that full PPR, maybe we see him get a little bit closer to the back end 2 wide receiver range, but that's going to depend on touchdowns. He's going to have to get back to some of those touchdowns. The 3 that he scored last year, that's not going to cut it. We're going to need to see him get more towards that maybe 7 to 8 touchdown range. And if he does, and we see similar targets for him, then yes, that would be great for his upside. One thing I'm concerned about, though, is that Washington defense is freaking fantastic, and it's gotten even better this offseason. So I don't think we're going to see too much negative game script for Ryan Fitzpatrick, which is kind of an area that he's thrived in the past. I think we're going to see a little bit more of a balanced approach here, which means quite a bit of running the ball with Antonio Gibson, and I think Curtis Samuel loses some targets in the red zone because they were really heavy with Antonio Gibson there last year. I mean, at one point in time, if the Washington football team got into the red zone, I mean, Antonio Gibson was getting the ball. We knew it, that a score was potentially coming there. So overall, like it. Right now, wide receiver 3 range. If the touchdowns come back, maybe low end wide receiver 2. Terry McLaurin for me is going to be in that wide receiver 1 range. I think this helps him because now this is another guy underneath that defenses have to pay attention to. So Terry McLaurin will be able to stretch the field a little bit. We'll see if they try to bring in another wide receiver. If Curtis Samuel will be the only guy, they'll put him in the slot. Maybe if they put Harmon or Antonio Gandy-Golden on the outside, we'll see what happens on the other side of the ball as well. So there you have it, Headliner Nation. Some quick breaking news for you. Do me a favor, if you're new here to the channel, hit that subscribe button, become a part of Headliner Nation today. In the comments, let me know, what do you think of this signing? Do you like it? Do you think it's good for Curtis Samuel's fantasy value? And as always, if you appreciate that content, hit that like button for me. Ladies and gentlemen, have a good one. I'm going to get out of here. I'll see you on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners. Make sure y'all are staying safe and staying healthy.